Good day, everyone. Today I'll be presenting my final presentation for Design Studio 2. And just to give a brief idea of how the design looks like, this is a perspective view from, this is an orthographic view from above the site itself. You can see the circulation and the spaces themselves. So my moving on to the design concept, it's based on the idea of Rhapsody, which connects to my client, who is Jenny Kissin, who is a pianist who is at the age of 59. It relates mainly to his emotional core and his belief that development is necessary to being able to live a fulfilling life. And a rhapsody is by itself a singular movement of music where it is very emotional and it is all about change and progression. This this helps relate to the representation in architecture based just solely on the musical definitions, where a singular movement of work translates into an axial movement, and the ability to emotionally change according to your preference through a free flowing sequence of spaces, and the ranges of highly contrasting emotions translating into contrasting spaces. You can see over here within this diagram that regardless of how you start and regardless of the sequences of the space that you do, it will always start and end within a linear form. So this is just the entrance of the site. You can see how this is again and just an overall view, so you can understand the feeling of how a visitor would look like, how a visitor would feel when they're visiting the site. They'd see the stage first, and they'd still be able to see the rest of the garden, allowing for a free interaction within the space, and still preserving a relative sense of privacy for the client and the client's family. So within these plans, you can see how the axial cluster is very well illustrated. So the axis goes through the center point here and the clusters of spaces that accompany this axis as well. The circulation, as you can tell, helps with illustrating the axis to a great degree, alongside the facade of the space, where each of these spaces are relatively open through the use of curtain walls and windows on this side. Next on, we'll be moving towards the episodes and how the system I've created to design these spaces relate to how I design them. So each of the spaces individually and individually correspond to the site as a whole through these ideas of how emotion is invoked through music and through design, either through form, light, texture, sound, and material. And so each of these have like two facets to them, contrasting and complementary, but not opposites, allowing for a sense of variation within each of these spaces. In addition to that, the organizing principles I've chosen, as I explained before, are the axial clustered organization, along with the principle of axis, and rhythm and hierarchy, rhythm and transformation contributing to the sense of change, and hierarchy being the climax or the center of the music itself. Because moving on, you can see how this elevation, let's use the elevation to illustrate some of these examples. The tenseness and the amusing, and how the amusing, how a space can be amusing, or how a space can be tense. So the tenseness of the spatial tension of the vertical elements, and the sorry, 1 second. The spatial tension of the vertical elements and the visual inertia of the horizontal elements uh, that's supported by virtue of its context towards the buildings, and how the roofs contribute, how the roofs and the windows contribute to an amusing feeling as opposed to a tense feeling. So they're contrasting, but they still complement each other within a singular space. This, in addition to how the horizontal elements complement the vertical elements within the spaces. And if you can see that the space underneath the buildings where it's supported by just the concrete space, it allows for a lot of movement underneath the spaces for people to interact with the site itself. This will be further illustrated within the sectional perspectives later on. So this is the initial proposed floor space taken up by each of these spaces. For the most part, we've kept to this consistent amount. You can see here illustrated within the area plan. So this is 27 meters squared, 27 meters squared, 17 plus 22, a total of 39 meters squared, and a total of 45 for the living space. Remaining fairly consistent with these, completely under 150 meters squared total. And how this adjacent, and you can see here how the design consideration matrix took into consideration all of these factors that we've discussed previously, while also seeing within the adjacency matrix why it is that we've divided the spaces into more of types of spaces as opposed to a singular space itself, because for the most part there is little to no relation between the spaces besides the main idea behind them. So the master space is a master space, the guest space is a guest space, then the office space itself is the office toilet, the stage is a space by itself, kitchen, dining, and indoor living space are space by themselves. And it gives a sense of freedom for them to be able to choose whether or not they want to interact with any given space on any given day. So if they choose to, they could just as easily remain in one space and not interact with any other space, and they can just continue within the rest of the space. So given here, let's say the client itself the client themselves just wants to stay in, they can stay in. They are also allowed to just continue over here and still be able to interact with the space and just return back from start to end within the linear form. Over here, you can see how the linear organization is very clearly illustrated through a straight line, and you can see it's a developmental process throughout my design process, where this is just the linear organization, and this one is corresponding to the site itself, allowing for views. This one allowing for the objects within the site to be undisturbed, the trees themselves, the circulation of the path, and how these ramps were added as a way to relate to both the linear organization and the ramps themselves being an option that was chosen because in consideration of the age of the clients and those they would consider as guests. This is a sectional perspective of the office. You can see how the client would be able to relate emotionally to the people he is playing for, while also being able to work privately or out in the open if he chooses. Structural precedence. I took the columns of the sky house to be able to preserve that sense of freedom for people to interact with the site. The roof house, allowing for more interesting forms while still being able to fend off the elements, and the curtain walls giving a full view of the site itself. So yeah, you can see how these spaces underneath the buildings allow for people to just explore the site itself and allow for privacy and cooling in response to the Malaysian in response to the acoustics that are required and the Malaysian need for cooling. So there's passive cooling systems within the site. You can see how these sections are you can see how these sections are. And how the master bedroom has a view of the site, while the guest bedroom has a view of the stage and the site, because more often than not, I would assume the only person that would be here would be the wife, and I think she'd rather be able to see him playing very clearly from the dining room. With that, I would like to end my presentation. Thank you so much, and have a good day.